The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I sat in the back row of Courtroom 4B on a Tuesday morning. The air conditioning hummed. The wooden benches were hard. I had been there since 8:30 a.m., watching case after case move through the system like items on a conveyor belt. Traffic violations, probation hearings, plea agreements read aloud in monotone voices. Then they brought him in. The courtroom was smaller than most people imagine, maybe 40 feet across. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The walls were that particular shade of beige that exists only in government buildings. The judge sat elevated behind a dark wooden bench. The American flag hung motionless in the corner. The court reporter typed silently, her fingers moving across the keys without sound. There were 12 people in the gallery that morning. I counted them. Most were family members of other defendants. An older woman knitted in the third row. Two men in suits whispered to each other near the door. A young mother tried to keep her toddler quiet with a coloring book. The bailiff stood near the side entrance, arms crossed. He wore a dark uniform and had the expression of someone who had seen this exact scene hundreds of times before. He checked his watch twice while we waited. The prosecutor shuffled papers at her table. She was maybe 35, wearing a gray suit. Her coffee cup said, "World's Best Mom" on the side. She didn't look at anyone while she organized her files. The defense attorney sat alone at the other table. He was older, maybe 60. His briefcase was worn at the corners. He kept adjusting his tie even though it was already straight. The man they brought in was 28 years old. I learned this later from the court documents. He wore an orange jumpsuit that was too big in the shoulders. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He walked slowly, looking straight ahead. His shoes made no sound on the carpet. He had a scar above his left eyebrow. His hair was cut short. When he sat down next to his attorney, he placed his cuffed hands on the table very carefully, as if he didn't want to make any sudden movements. His mother sat in the second row. I didn't know it was his mother at first, but when he turned his head slightly, she leaned forward. She didn't wave. She didn't say anything. She just leaned forward so he could see her face. The man had been in custody for 14 months. This was not his first court appearance. There had been pretrial hearings, motions, delays. His attorney had filed paperwork requesting a jury trial. The prosecution had offered a plea deal. The defense had countered. This had gone back and forth for months. But today was sentencing day. The trial had ended 3 weeks earlier. The jury had deliberated for 2 days. The verdict had been read in this same courtroom. Now we were here for the final step. The American criminal justice system processes millions of cases every year. In this particular county, the courthouse handled approximately 15,000 felony cases annually. That's roughly 40 cases every single day the court was in session. Sentencing hearings follow a standard format. The prosecution speaks first. They present their recommendation based on sentencing guidelines, the nature of the offense, the defendant's criminal history, and something called aggravating factors. Then the defense speaks. They present mitigating factors, reasons the sentence should be less severe. Character witnesses sometimes testify. The defendant has the right to make a statement. Then the judge decides. Judges use sentencing guidelines, but they also have discretion. The guidelines provide a range. For this particular charge, the range was 12 to 20 years. The prosecution had recommended 18. The defense had asked for the minimum, 12. The man had no prior felony convictions. He had a high school education. He had been employed before his arrest. His attorney had submitted letters from his employer, his pastor, and 3 family members. These letters described him as reliable, hardworking, and remorseful. But the jury had found him guilty. The evidence had been presented. Witnesses had testified. The verdict was final. Now we were here to learn the number that would determine how much of his life would be spent behind bars. The judge entered through a door behind the bench. We all stood. He told us to sit. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and reading glasses hanging on a chain around his neck. He had been a judge in this county for 14 years. He opened the file in front of him. He didn't look at the man in the orange jumpsuit. Not yet. The prosecutor stood first. She spoke for 7 minutes. She outlined the facts of the case without emotion. She mentioned the impact on the victims. She referenced the sentencing guidelines. She said the number, 18 years. She sat down. The defense attorney stood. His voice was quieter than the prosecutor's. He talked about his client's background. He mentioned the letters of support. He talked about rehabilitation potential. He talked about the man's mother, who had driven 4 hours to be here today. He talked about second chances. He asked for 12 years. He sat down. The judge asked if the defendant wanted to speak. The man stood slowly. His cuffed hands shook slightly. He said 5 sentences. He said he was sorry. He said he thought about what he had done every single day. He said he wanted to be better. He said he knew he had let people down. He said he hoped someday people could forgive him. Then he sat down. The courtroom was completely silent. The judge looked at his file again. He looked at the man. He looked at the sentencing guidelines printed on a sheet of paper. He took off his glasses. He put them back on. Then he spoke. I've reviewed everything submitted to this court. I've considered the arguments from both counsel. I've listened to the defendant's statement. He paused. The sentence of this court is 15 years in the state correctional facility. He said it in the same tone someone might use to order coffee. No emphasis. No drama. Just the number. 15 years. The man didn't move. His mother made a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. Something in between. The bailiff stepped forward slightly, ready. The judge continued speaking. He explained that the defendant would receive credit for time served. He explained the possibility of parole after serving 85% of the sentence. He said something about good behavior. He said something about rehabilitation programs. But I don't think the man heard any of it. He was staring at the table in front of him. His shoulders had dropped. His breathing had changed. You could see it even from the back row. 30 seconds ago, he had been standing. He had been speaking. He had been hoping. Now he knew. 15 years. The bailiff touched the man's shoulder. It was time to stand. Time to go back through the side door. Back to the holding cell. Back to the jail. Eventually, back to the prison where he would begin serving his sentence. The man stood. He turned slightly toward his mother. She was crying silently, her hand pressed against her mouth. He looked at her for maybe 3 seconds. Then the bailiff guided him toward the door. His attorney packed his briefcase. He didn't look satisfied. He didn't look disappointed. He just looked tired. The prosecutor closed her file and moved to the next case. She pulled out a different folder. A different name. A different number. The judge made a note in his records. Then he called the next case. The whole thing had taken 22 minutes from the moment the man entered the courtroom to the moment he left. I timed it. The young mother with the toddler gathered her things. The older woman with the knitting put it away in her bag. The 2 men in suits left through the main door. Life in the courtroom continued. But for the man in the orange jumpsuit, everything had changed. In those 30 seconds, from the moment the judge said 15 years to the moment the bailiff touched his shoulder, an enormous amount of time had been subtracted from his life. 15 years. 180 months. Approximately 5,475 days. He would be 43 years old when he got out. His mother would be 71. The toddler coloring in the gallery would be graduating from high school. I followed the case through public records after that day. Not because I knew the man. Not because I had any connection to the case. But because I couldn't stop thinking about those 30 seconds. The man was transferred to a medium security facility 6 weeks later. He was assigned to a cell with 1 other inmate. He was given a prison job in the laundry facility, which paid 18 cents per hour. He attended mandatory programming sessions. He followed the rules. His mother visited once a month for the first 2 years. Then her health declined, and the visits became less frequent. She sent letters every week. I know this because prisoners can receive mail, and the system keeps records of correspondence. After 3 years, the man completed his GED certificate through the prison education program. After 5 years, he enrolled in a vocational training course. After 7 years, he had no major disciplinary infractions on his record, but none of that changed the number. 15 years. With good behavior, maybe 13. But still, 13 years is a long time. During those years, things changed outside the prison walls. Technology advanced. Politics shifted. People got married, had children, bought houses, changed careers, moved to different cities. The man's friends from before moved on with their lives. His younger brother graduated from college. His niece was born. His father passed away. All of this happened while he lived in a cell that measured 8 feet by 10 feet. When prisoners talk about time, they don't talk about it the way we do on the outside. They don't say, "See you next week," or "maybe next month." They count things differently. They mark time in years, in parole hearing dates, in projected release dates that seem impossibly far away. The man will eventually be released. He will walk out of the prison gate. He will be in his 40s. He will have to find a place to live, find a job, figure out how to use technology that didn't exist when he went in. He will have to check a box on every job application that says, "Have you ever been convicted of a felony?" Some people successfully rebuild their lives after prison. Some don't. The statistics are complicated, but everyone who goes through this system carries it with them. Always. I've thought about that Tuesday morning many times since then. I've thought about the fluorescent lights and the humming air conditioning. I've thought about the prosecutor's coffee cup. I've thought about the defense attorney's worn briefcase. I've thought about the mother in the second row. But mostly I've thought about those 30 seconds. The judge spoke a number. The number became real. The man's future changed. Not gradually. Not over time. Instantly. That's how the system works. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Arrests, investigations, charges, hearings, motions, trials, deliberations, and then, in a single moment, a decision. A number. A consequence that stretches years into the future. I think about this sometimes when I hear people talk about the criminal justice system in abstract terms. When they debate policies and philosophies and theories. Those conversations happen in newspapers and on television and in legislative chambers. But the actual system, the real one, happens in courtrooms like Courtroom 4B. It happens on Tuesday mornings. It happens with fluorescent lights humming and air conditioning running and a judge saying a number in the same tone he might use to order lunch. And in those 30 seconds, someone's life changes in ways that can't be undone. By the time the cell door closed that night, he understood something no one had explained. Time doesn't stop. It just moves differently when you're counting it in years instead of days. These stories aren't about crime. They're about consequences. If you listen closely, there are more stories like this.